We hit hard daily exercise sets together. Every day we're grinding it out. Join us, get ripped, get healthy, and most importantly, be consistent. The only way you can be without fail, which is having a team of people doing it with you. Contact us through the email on the screen to get started. It's 2024. Donald Trump just won the presidential nomination. We're going to talk about why that happened, and more importantly, what we can learn from this, what we can take into the future. What are the parties going to do next time? What should they do next time? I'm going to read a real quick definition. You ready? Populism
Go for it.
is a range of political stances that emphasize the idea of the common people and often position this group in opposition to a perceived elite group. It is frequently associated with anti-establishment and anti-political sentiment. That's why Trump won. Effectively, like, also, you know, so there's like kind of two sides of one coin here that I'm going to present. And my claim is he didn't win on policy. He didn't win on character. He didn't win on like a religious or spiritual sentiment. He didn't win on, like, none of those things even make sense when you look at Trump as a whole. I think the reason he won is a much more bipartisan thing. Like, the lesson to take from Trump could be learned and applied to the Democratic Party or again in the Republican Party. I think that's what's sort of beautiful about it. It's a non-policy issue. It's populism, and it's finding a new form of populism that is oriented around authenticity in the new social media age specifically. And there's evidences of that at the turn of various technologies. Like, famously, JFK was in the first televised, if I recall, the first televised debate, and he was behind in the polls pretty significantly against his opponent. I remember the guy's name. But then when he was shown, you can Google this or whatever, or Chat GPT it. When the debate came up, JFK was really handsome and like visually had great mannerisms. He didn't fidget like I do or anything like that. His opponent was like old and ugly and just like awkward on camera, although he had like a really, a great voice on the radio, and his policy statements were great. So, because of that newfound technology, it like radically changed the way that political candidates needed to present themselves and even who they were, like period. I think in that same way with social media, with TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Shorts, people able to look up every piece of information. When you get up and you say the same thing, I'm a middle-class woman, I'm a middle-class woman, I'm a middle-class woman over and over again. There's people who have made, massive videos of just her saying that 1,000 times. And look, I've watched the Donald Trump China video. If you haven't watched it, please go watch the Donald Trump China video and laugh at how many times Donald Trump has said the word China, because it's great. But point being, in the digital age, Trump has arisen as a new kind of populist. I think the only equivalent of him might be Bernie Sanders, although he's far less brash. But he is just as authentic. I guess my statement is that there's an authentic form of populism that needs to be embodied in order to win elections from now on. And this is regardless of policy, fully separate from. I really believe Donald Trump won the popular vote, not because of any policy issue, not because people even like related to him at all, but because they perceived him as non-fake and non-political. Because for everyone's lifetime, they have watched, and this really began around JFK, early 60s and late 50s, like television arising. I think that people just got used to, political candidates who, instead of talking about just policy issues as public servants and as lawmakers, they began to say, hey, I'm just like you in one way or another. And after, a couple of generations of this, in Western American politics, we've gotten a little bit, everybody's aware of it. And we know that there's two different actors being presented to us, but we still vote on the ones that we like more. Do you remember your parents talking about George W? I was 18 in 2008. So my first vote, in my first presidential election I got to vote in was Obama and John McCain. But I remember my parents talking about Al Gore and George W. Bush. If you remember that election, and it was won by George W. Bush via Florida, which was a swing state, which was run by Jeb Bush, George W. Bush's brother. So that's, it's neither here nor there. But I remember everybody being like, man, I just feel like I remember hearing my parents be like, oh, I just feel like I could have a beer with George W. Bush. You know what I mean? Like, and that's my grandpa was talking about that. Like, there was this personableness to George W. Bush that appealed to conservative people and to farmers and to small town folk. And that was, unfortunately, that was intentional. Like, he went to like a Ivy League school. He was raised a cajillionaire. Like, the guy's not a small town farmer kind of a guy. You see what I'm saying? He's a wealthy political elite. And so is Al Gore. Like, they're both just banking on acting. They're stooges. They're just acting towards specific demographics. They've just been kind of like honed in, like a spy or something. Like, they've been trained their whole life to like do this job and to represent in theater, like they're thespians, like representing demographics. And all of a sudden Donald Trump shows up and he doesn't care. He's not representing demographics. Like, otherwise he wouldn't have won the popular vote. Look at the guy. Like, he's openly a billionaire. He's brash. He's rude. He's cruel. He's got prejudices. He doesn't, the way he treats people isn't the way that most people actually like don't like to treat people that way or to even think about people that way, but they still voted for him. Why? It's like, well, because he's not an actor. There's never been anybody who's made it through a primary who isn't an actor. I think that what comes to mind is like why there's been a lot of party candidates in the past who haven't made it through. And I think what says, Bernie Sanders, Ron Paul, Ralphie Boy, but they didn't make it. Weren't able to get through a primary. And I think there was a convergence, and the convergence is Donald Trump made it through a Republican primary somehow in 2016. And like, that was when the party GOP was done trying to kill him. Not really, but I mean, it was, political death. They tried to kill him. He made it through that. And then social media and TikTok and viral moments and him being authentic, his authentic self, which I'm not saying is like his authentic self is a great guy. I'm just saying it's real. And I think that's why people voted for him, way beyond any form of policy or anything. Does that make sense? And do you agree? And how do you disagree if you disagree?
I agree with you that he's definitely not a part of the old guard in the sense that he is not a politician by career. But I also think that there are a lot of other factors, and unless we polled every single American and they told the truth about exactly why they voted for him, we will never for sure know exactly why people decided to vote the way they did. But what we can look at is take it or leave it exit polls. And so we can see who moved from voting in the last three elections. If you guys look online, you can see the Washington Post has it where it's 2020 and 2016, and they compare by race and gender who voted for Hillary and who voted for Biden and who voted for Kamala against Trump over those last three elections. So that's the Washington Post has that, which will tell you kind of how things switched over the last three elections. But in regards to this election, you can look at exit polls that is basically people stating or people self-identifying with their race and gender, who they voted for. And so it's interesting to see. I can tell you who voted for him, but I can't I don't have, there's no data really on why, other than in the exit poll I saw during the election night. I think I was watching CBS, I want to say, and they had an exit poll that was going on, and the bulk of their pie chart was people were voting or made their voting decision based on the economy. So I think in one rebuttal against your opinion would be that I think people voted, made their decision based on economic policy, and obviously Trump and Kamala had a lot of um, well, they're opposing sides, so they had a lot of different policies. But you know, it's not like one of those old elections where I don't know if you saw any of the reels going around where it was like during a lot of the debates, especially with like Obama, or even all the way back with Bush, and before that, back to like JFK, where there was a lot of the politicians saying, you know, oh, that, you know, that's a great point. You know, I actually agree with, you know, my opposition on this point, you know, and it was, there was a lot of things that where, you know, there was not a big divide. Um, these past few elections with Trump in the game has been much more stark black and white. And so I think that a lot of people probably did switch a lot of people did switch from voting blue, from voting Democrat to voting Republican. And I think a big portion of the reason would be because of policy. I think that people are more awakened to or have seen that the border has gotten worse. I think that they have also seen that the economy is worse now. And I think that they have seen that overseas, um, foreign affairs has fallen. Russia was not invading Ukraine. Hamas and Israel weren't going at it. So I think that and we hadn't pulled out of Afghanistan. In my opinion, I think that Afghanistan may have swung some voters as well. You're probably looking at the majority of kind of the blue collar white American male looking at that and seeing how we're seen overseas, you know, military forward. But at the same time, Trump pulled over a lot of the Hispanic males, which I think came as a huge surprise because I think that Democrats were counting on the their policies about the border to be kind of inclusive of existing Hispanics that are here in the United States. And so I think it came as a shock for them to swing over to vote for Trump. But I have two quick exit polls that I wanted to run through, and they are based on one is gender, race, and age and education, which I think are four huge factors. And then the other one that I think is a little more poignant is sex by race, which is kind of a more black and white look. But if you look at, I'm going to say on the left, those numbers first, because that's the way it displays on the screen, and then on the right. So Harris on the left. So by gender, males voted 42%. So that's all races, voted 42% for Harris and then 55% for Trump. So Trump won out on the male vote. And females voted majority 53% towards Harris. And then if you break it down by race, you've got white for Harris was 41% and for Trump was 57. Blacks for Harris came in huge. It was 85%, though Trump did win a little bit more of the black male vote than he had in the previous two elections.
Sure. So pause really quick. Pause the demographics. So I want to address a few of your points before I lose them.
Before we get into the demographics.
Well, to me, I think I don't feel that the demographics have much bearing on anything. Although, like, just that's my perspective. I could be wrong, but I feel like there's kind of lines in the sand generally. There's sort of a spectrum that everybody's on, and there's narratives and identity that gets wrapped into different kind of political parties. So there are some people that will be blue forever. And there will some people who will be red forever. They will just vote Republican no matter who's on the ticket. They will vote blue and they will vote Democrat no matter who's on the ticket. And they will die on the hill of defending their candidates like beyond logic and reason. Um, and so we're going to disregard those because we know that there's a percentage of votes that are going to come in, and there's going to be a slight. The reason why they nerd out about the demographics is because, you know, there's a lot of interest in these political machines as to, like, you know, how democratic are blacks and black males, or oh my gosh, they're turning Republican, and there's all these, you know, speculations and all these things that go into that. And I think it's missing the point a little bit, although I'll leave that political science to like the political workers who are doing that. But I think what is more useful to look at is to look at like the middle of the spectrum, where people who are undecided, people who are like, well, I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm voting red this time around, or I'm a registered Republican, but I'm voting blue this time around, or you know, registered independent voters, and people who live in swing states who vote differently, people who vote dynamically, who like think about it and are trying to, and those people are using all sorts of different metrics and sets of information to determine. Everybody has different rules. People say, well, I vote based on the policy. Some people have specific issues that are super important to them, and I get that. But think about what I'm saying here. I'm saying that people just don't believe, people who, no, I just don't think anybody in America anymore believes that politicians mean what they say when they're talking about policy issues. And we know that they're using those as kind of makeup to maneuver and to debate. You know, it's the debate mathematics that they're trying to use. They're trying to outmaneuver their opponents. We all know that when Kamala Harris gets up and gets pressed about Palestine, and she gives this kind of like two-sided answer, she's concerned about how she's being perceived, right? And that's totally normal. That's how a politician should be thinking. A politician should be concerned with how they're perceived, right? Not Donald Trump. He doesn't give a crap how you perceive him. He doesn't care how he is seen. He leans into his brashness. He leans into what he thinks he would just like to say. And that in the past has been the signs of a losing third party candidate, I would say, like, but not in this case. And that's what I'm saying, that authenticity, where it's like, he doesn't care about the demographics, and therefore he's not trying to win them over. Kamala Harris was very concerned with the demographics. And listen, so is every politician that's come before her. I'm not trying to just like crap on her. I think it's important for Democrats and independents, but Democrats especially, to look at the performance of Kamala Harris and not be like, oh, she failed, she was awful. I think that most any politician who's a real, true career politician standing next to Donald Trump is going to look like a loser and a poser, not because he's so awesome, but because he's authentic. Like, you know, it's like having two different friends in high school, and one of them is like the popular kid, and the other one is like just like your friend who plays music and has hobbies and is good at class and stuff like that. He's just an authentic sort of friend. When they stand next to each other, you realize that this mirage you have to uphold to be the popular kid, like, it hides who you are. You know what I mean? So when Kamala Harris was giving her kind of two-sided answer she'd give on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, she's like, well, Israel has a right to defend itself, the most overstated war, like international affairs statement of 2024. How many times I've heard that from everybody, from both parties, all this stuff, because Israel is like tied to our deep state for some reason. We just have like proxy nation Israel, is my opinion. And I think that because all the deep money on both parties says the same things, takes the same stances, which tells you that there's lobbyists there. And when you look into it, there's just a lot. And so Kamala Harris is connected to that lobbyist program and those corporate interests, right? That's why she's saying those canned statements. And she's also trying to like dance carefully. And, you know, she's going through like speech prep with like coaches and stuff beforehand, thinking about like how to take certain issues and stuff. And I'm not crapping on that. Barack Obama did it. George W. Bush did it. Bill Clinton did it. Like George H.W. Bush did it. Like all of them have done this. This is just being a politician, right? Donald Trump crumpled it up and threw it out the window and just started freeballing and making the weave on live television. Like that is different than nothing has ever happened like that. And because of it, TikTok, Instagram, took him way more seriously because canned political statements from politicians aren't interesting to watch or consume. And now we're in like a digital consuming like era. So an authentic person standing up there being real, I think, regardless of policy, like wins out. To go back to your policy statements, you made a few of them. I think that they I guess my argument, I don't think that none of those things matter because I think that they do. And I think that people tell themselves lots of different things, whether they're true or not. And sometimes there's small reasons that build into big decisions. I'm just arguing that like the vastly primary reason that everybody might not even be super consciously aware of is I think that why is it that they like, I don't know, I just like him, or, oh, I think he's going to do this or he's going to do that. But, I've never heard so many people point at the policy of a politician before, more than I have heard people point at the policies of Donald Trump. And they've pointed at things that he hasn't even clearly said. Like, well, I think he's going to end the war in Israel. And he's like, he hasn't said that. He hasn't laid out a plan to do that. He's made promises about ending the war in Ukraine, but he's like with almost zero detail talked about Israel because he's friends with Netanyahu and stuff. But he's just said like, well, it wouldn't have even happened if I was in, he's just kind of like takes the time travel route. But people still kind of connect this idea. And I think they're doing that because they like him, because he's a real person. They connect with him as a real person. Even if he's not somebody they'd want to hang out with, they trust him to be authentically who he says he is doing. Whereas, whether it's Barack Obama, the ultimate statesman, or Kamala Harris, the giggly, not quite that kind of a statesman, says something, we're not sure whether that's real or not. You know what I mean? Like when George W. Bush tells us we're going to war with the country for a reason, like I'm not sure if we're all of a sudden we're like, wow, I think he was deceiving us. I'm not sure that was actually why we were there, right? There was all these reasons and excuses. So, the old misnomer, you can't trust a politician, is true. Like you can't trust a politician, they're actors. And Donald Trump isn't an actor. And whether he deserves it or not, he earned hundreds of millions of people's trust.
Yeah, to some extent, I think it's a perfect storm because you've got, on one hand, Trump, who was president before, and so we know what we're getting when we have him in office. And there's a little bit of fear associated with how January 6th went down, that the left definitely sees that as a huge warning flag that he's going to come in as this authoritarian dictator, and once we give him power again, it's never going to be let go. But to disregard that and just say we kind of know what we had for 4 years, compared to Biden, who was vice president, also a career politician, America, without going into election denial, America chose Biden for round two
Fraud.
against
It
Trump.
was fraud.
Right, which would be a whole different podcast. But if we just go,
I just can't even take that seriously, though. Like, I've heard so many people say that, and now there's people on the left saying there was fraud, and I'm just like, this is just take ownership, people.
Yeah, well, I think at this point, all we can do is, if we want to compare why Trump lost and why he won, we have to just assume, for the sake of this argument, we'll just assume that America voted for Biden, and we'll leave it at that. So,
Yep.
Biden won, for the sake of this argument. I think what you see is that I think America felt more comfortable with the swing voters in the middle. They felt more comfortable with kind of that old guard classic, somebody who had already been vice president. You kind of know what you're getting with this old milk toast.
I think that's true, and I think it's because of COVID. I think that was a really unique situation. COVID's happening, and you're kind of like, let's go back to what we've known forever. Do you know what I mean? Like the Spanish,
sure. Yeah.
the equivalent of the Spanish flu is happening. That was the perception. And it was like, let's go back to mom and dad's house. Like that, a lot of people literally did that, right? For the sense of like emotional safety. It's kind of like, okay, let's go back to like having a politician's politician as a president.
I totally
he'll get us through this. But all of a sudden, I'm not sure if I can trust the new guy.
Right. There's a flu going around. Let's stop draining the swamp. I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just get the regular people back in here.
Yeah, the swamp
Totally.
knows how pharma works and stuff. So let's
Right,
do
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Stop, firing people. This could be bad. Um, yeah, that's funny. Uh, but to go back to the point of going back with Biden in contrast to now Kamala is running for president. She has never been vice president. Um, she was a senator of California for a short period of time. She was also never a governor. And I think that I think governors make better presidential candidates because you have literally been in charge of a small portion of the United States. And a senator's role obviously is super important. You have to handle stress.
So there's definitely arguments you could make that Kamala wasn't a great candidate, and I think that probably I think she was an okay candidate though. Actually, like I think she wasn't the best. I'm not sure if she would have made it through a Democratic primary, and I really don't know why they didn't do that. I don't know why they didn't do a Democratic primary. I know it felt like short notice and stuff, but it just seems like the DNC shot itself in the foot big time by doing that. Not just
How
because
many voters do you think they would have picked up by just going through that process, though? Because as soon as Kamala was announced, there was so much excitement on the left for
yeah,
her and so much money
and
poured
that's
into
my
her
point.
campaign.
I think it was a bad decision, but I think it's mostly just because of the perception, the public perception it created of her that she wasn't really. There was no way to counter that. Like, oh, we didn't really like the party didn't really choose her. It was just a shoe, and no, we didn't choose her. There wasn't a primary process of any kind, and so it was just so it made it feel kind of weird, and I think it made people on the left feel like they just had to kind of rally behind this person, but I think she is somebody that could have won other elections, possibly for president in the past, for sure. I think that's totally possible. She's not a bad politician. The problem is that she's a politician. And we are now living in an age where you have to you normally a politician hides their geeky self and hides their nerdy self and hides their weird laugh and goes through tons of coaching and hits canned points that are aimed at demographics, and that is the game. And she's not bad at that game. The problem is that game doesn't exist anymore. Like their culture has changed, technologies have adapted a lot in the last 5 years. A lot has changed. I mean, COVID itself drove so many people into FaceTime and Zoom and more technology pushing us deeper into social media. And then there was a time around that time in 2015, 16, 17, we thought, kind of pre-COVID, people thought Facebook would disappear and it would go out of business and stuff because they were, now it's a giant household name along with all the social medias are here to stay. They're just kind of all evolving. So it's different now, even just in 5 years, a lot. I mean, God, 10 years ago, it's insane levels of change. All I'm saying is I think we just pushed over a precipice where now politicians have to be more real. They have to be perceived as people because we know that they are. And because there's cameras absolutely everywhere, we get to see all the nuances and stuff. Like you can't hide Kamala's weird laugh, nor can you hide Donald Trump's weird dance. Go back and find the weird way that George W. Bush danced. I dare you. It's hard to find. Why? Because everything was on videotape. And this is the 90s. You know what I'm saying? Now it's like when I remember when Donald Trump's dance went viral. And then do you know what he did? Did his campaign's response? He came out to the next rally doing the dance for minutes, into what was kind of an accidental thing that should have been an embarrassment. Instead of going the traditional, old hand route of let's have coaches coach that out of him, never do that again. You know what I mean? We're going to lose the male blacks in between the ages of 30 and 55 and in the Michigan sub metro area. Like that's how the political science world has always thought. And instead, because his real human geeky side, just like every dad in the world has, or every grandpa in the world has a weird dance, Trump's came out and his campaign decided, let's embrace it. So he comes out doing that dance. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris came out embracing her weird laugh or embracing parts of her personality that she's she was really trying to cover up with canned statements, things like that. What are her real feelings on things? Some of that I don't even feel like was accessible to her, because it isn't to most politicians, because they really are there as kind of employees of their lobbied interests. And Trump was far less so there for those reasons. Does that make sense? So
It does. But I think that one, you've got Trump, who was president for 4 years, and then basically, if he had to fill out a resume, would have put on his resume currently unemployed politician over the last 4 years, because he was still running without running. And
yeah,
then, because he definitely, I don't think he probably announced a run. He did, I do remember he announced his run for this election, but I don't think it was really on the fence very much at all. I think it was assumed that he most likely would run for this election, because he announced extremely early. I think he announced like a year and a half ago. So he's been basically running the entire time and trying to keep himself at the forefront of people's social medias and whatnot. But I think that Kamala Harris's whatever she does that is awkward, I don't think that it is detestable to voters at all. And I don't think that she's so unknown. You definitely have heard, like, from people that are unrelatable. Like, I would say Ted Cruz is definitely kind of an awkward guy. Jeb Bush is an awkward guy. DeSantis, people complained that he was too robotic. And then the governor of Utah, that ran against Obama, the
yeah,
second.
that guy.
People said that he's Mormon, he's a businessman. The complaint about him was that he was very unaccessible for kind of the common man. And I don't think Kamala was as far away from that, especially, Tyler, she grew up middle class. And so that, I
I've
think she
heard
definitely was
her
trying
say
to
that.
hone in
I feel like I've
on
heard her say
on
that.
that
Yeah,
message.
yeah.
But then I think whether she seems relatable or not compared to Trump, I think that Trump has a lot more negatives that are blasted out in the media that are true negatives,
Well,
saying
that's the thing.
where you would
I've
grab
heard,
people and hit the real or not
grabs
or
women in
accuse, or
specific
all of the
places.
the
Yeah,
women things and lawsuits. And obviously anybody who has a lot of money is going to have lawsuits. I mean, that's all you hear about is, well, if you start your own company, someone will sue you. So there's definitely going to be, there's
but
lawsuits, there's legal things.
but all of these things, I've heard all these arguments in the left that are like, well, what's going on? This man's a felon. This man, look at these quotes. He said this, he said this, he said this. He's willing to do this. He's so immoral, right? And when religion stuff gets attacked, the evangelical Christians are like, well, King David wasn't perfect. We'll start pulling all these weird things out of the Bible to like justify the immorality of Donald Trump, right? And I don't even want to go there. It's not even a thing for me. Like, there's a valid confusion on the left going, why would people vote for this guy? Like, and MSNBC right now is, in the morning show on MSNBC, and the night, like the head anchors are like, why did this happen? Well, I guess, if 51% of America voted for 52% voted for Donald Trump of America, I guess that 52% of America is misogynist, racist, sexist, all these things. But again, that's deciding, that's stating that people, that's the old way of thinking, the old guard, the old mindset of politics, the way it always has been is you're presented an actor that's targeted at demographics, and whoever can relate to the character, morals, values, fashions, and interests of that person, regardless, almost totally regardless of policy, that's who they're going to vote for. The person that they like, the person that they feel they can have a beer with, the person that they feel could be their brother or their sister or whatever, right? And so the statement that MSNBC is saying kind of like, well, like attacking America, basically saying, how could they vote for this guy because he's so racist? I guess that means you guys are racist. That is taking that assumption and putting those glasses on and saying people vote for what they are. And what I'm saying is that is the way it always has been, but that is not why people are voting for Donald Trump. You know, people want to vote for Kamala because she's kind and she's funny and she's joyful. That's the perception that she gives off. So she is targeting all women because all women think of themselves that way or are more that way. Men are less that way. And so then she kind of tries to come across this way to get to men who are that way or whatever. Like, again, this is the coaching going behind the room. You're trying to capture as many types of people as you can. You're not just trying to authentically be yourself so much. Certainly only to a specific point, and certainly, you know, only bits and pieces to let people know you are actually a human while you're stating all these really canned things. And that's the way it's always been. So it's like the left who is in confusion about why would people vote for such a blah 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 guy. It's like, well, that's sort of the point, is this blah 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 guy is being transparent. The best case of this that was ever made, I think, the first I'd ever heard of anything like this put this way, is the greatest comic of all time, Dave Chappelle, who SNL had host, which I think they immediately regretted, because the live monologue that opens up in the SNL show, Dave Chappelle basically just talked about Donald Trump got elected, and it's because he's transparent and tells the truth. He's standing there next to Rich
Oh,
Elise.
this was from like this week, from last week?
No, this was in regards to the 2016.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they had him on, and he talked about how he stood up there next to Hillary Clinton and all these like rich global elitists and political elitists from both parties, and she said he cheated on his. Dave Chappelle said she tried to punch him right in the taxes, and he said, "Yeah, I don't pay any taxes because that's how the system works." And I mean, everybody's jaws dropped, because like politicians aren't supposed to say that. You're not supposed to say, "Yeah, I don't pay any taxes." like,
Yeah, but
like he said, that was the moment that Donald Trump would become like the next president. And I think he's right, man. Dave Chappelle's a very, very smart person. Like, Donald Trump is transparent in a way that no politician has ever been. And he like wears it proudly, that transparency.
that might gain some people's favor, but the other thing about it though is that who he is when he what is talked about him and what is in the forefront of everybody's mind when they think about Trump is like what you were saying, where they have to be dismissive and bring in like King David to justify his actions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best examples of this is how, in my opinion, he got totally stomped in the debate against Kamala. And that was him just being
Yeah.
himself, just riffing up there. And it was not good. It was bad. And I
That
think
was her really winning by being coached and being strategic, because she baited him a couple times into things that she knew he would go on a tirade about that were pointless to talk about, and it made him look like a child. Like, it wasn't great. I mean, it wasn't a complete loss, but I mean, I think everybody felt like she won the debate.
it felt like as if you had when it was Trump versus Biden, it felt like it was an amateur MMA fighter versus somebody who had no training. And then when it was Trump versus Kamala, it felt like it was an amateur fighter versus a UFC fighter, like
Yeah, it
heavyweight
was a
title.
total right.
Like it, you
Well,
just saw him
I just really
dominate
felt
Biden, but Biden couldn't even put together a sentence. And then you saw him go against somebody who, in my opinion, I don't think Kamala, though she was a prosecutor, is you could see that based on the interviews that she had, she wasn't quick on her feet. She never had solid answers for anything. And I think she did a really outstanding job, which does fall into the category of maybe people were dismissive because they're like, oh, she was coached before the debate and she was able to dangle these things in front of his head that he just went after completely, hook, line, and sinker.
I think that the momentum was 100% in her favor nationally after that debate. Like the whole left was so excited and everything. Like, it was amazing. The difference is the kind of publicity they got, because that's what it's all about, is like, how much publicity can you get, and what is the public perception of you? Every bit of publicity after that she got was just standard fair political publicity, but all the publicity he got was wildly different, because he will do unscripted stuff all of the time. I don't even think it's so much about him. I just think that it's just him being himself. Like, he's just being unscripted. all the time. He's even talked about that being a big part of the reason people like him and why his rallies are so big, which is why he lost the debate, by the way. She brought up his rallies and was like, and I mean, my rallies were big. I think they were even bigger than yours. That's all she had to do. Boop. And he just freaked out. He freaked out and went off topic for like 20 minutes. He totally lost his cool. It was awful that she, did that because it worked. But I think that authenticity thing, it shines through in all the unscripted moments that comes after. Let's talk about Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn, and just there's a whole crew of podcasts that mostly all know each other, and they command the largest. This is also a really new element in all of this. The largest audiences in the country, like by a significant margin over the like legacy media. I looked up now, like with the ratings and everything, and they know how many people watch every day. MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News. Fox News doubles CNN and MSNBC's audiences. So, like, if out of all everybody watching DirecTV, as far as DirecTV and Dish and cable and all that, Fox News is the giant. But even then, they're getting 1 to 1.5 million views a day, like maximum on the best days during the month. Right. So that's not every single day. That's like best case scenario, 1 million views now at once. And most of that audience is recurring. So it's the same people every day. Joe Rogan, and I think their height was like 4 million views for a presidential candidate. Anybody, any of the big three. Joe Rogan had above 100 million views on Donald Trump. Some think 150. It's insane. He was getting 1.5 million views an hour on YouTube alone. Like after he posted the Donald Trump interview. It's absolutely insane. And Joe Rogan was openly like, come on, Kamala. And I've heard a lot of excuses like why she wouldn't. She had she required that there be, her campaign got back to him and said there need to be people in the room, need to come and do it here and all that, which again, standard fare for the old guard and the old way of doing things. But we're in a different world now where people want to see the real Kamala. People want to see, people want to see Kamala be offered a cigar by Joe and him giggle nervously and see what she actually says. That's what people want to see. People want to see what kind of.
But I would disagree with that because I think that the demographic of people who listen to podcasts or watch stream podcasts are going to be mostly men, and we know that from demographics. And I think that the majority of those men are also white men. So it may have picked up some of the male white voter base.
His demographics have been made known, and I don't know if this is across all platforms or if this is just Spotify, but it's around 85% men. Makes sense.
That's exactly what I would expect it to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in between 60 and 65% of people who would consider themselves conservative. 60 to 65. That's it. Not 80.
Did it have a by race breakdown at all from what you saw?
It may have. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sure it's probably predominantly white. I don't know.
I would think so, but that's only from me looking through the social media lens. I don't know what the ratio is
about,
like
Fox
African
News
American
is
or Hispanic
99
men.
Fox News is 99% Republican. MSNBC is 99% like progressive, like Democrat, liberal viewers, right? The Daily Wire is hard right, conservative, right? Like all of these news things. Joe Rogan, based on like the polling of his audience claims to be 65% Republican. That is not 95%. That's much closer to half and half. Like that is a lot of unknown voters, Democratic voters in that mix. And he has the largest audience in the world regularly. And since that interview, I have talked to two people who have listened to almost no Joe Rogan before, who for the first time went and listened to Joe Rogan because of the Donald Trump interview, who are like voting Democrats, generally speaking. And then I've talked to like
But that didn't sway their
at
vote,
least
did it?
three people in the last couple of weeks. I've talked to at least three people who are independents who went and listened to that, and it had a significant impact on the way that they voted. So I think that just not even talking about all of the other podcasts that Trump and his team went on, and that Harris and her team went on zero. I mean, she went on one big podcast and it didn't get crap for views.
Right. Well, that seems mind blowing to me, though I haven't talked to anyone who listened to the Joe Rogan podcast and it swayed their opinion. Um, but what's interesting about that does support your argument is because Trump didn't really talk about his policies. He mentioned a couple of things, but really him and Joe Rogan were for the majority of the time mostly just having a conversation, and they were having a conversation about things like the assassination attempt,
Right.
and Joe Rogan kind of fed a couple of things here and there about kind of what's a conspiracy theory, or not, yeah, kind of riffing with them like he does with a lot of his guests, where it's just a
Pretty much
conversation.
everybody.
And
Yeah.
he brought up a couple of things that were policy issues, but they didn't start at the top and work their way through
No.
Trump's
And
policies.
and there's this huge argument that like he's a Republican now, basically, and that was like a slanted interview. He just wanted to support Trump the whole time. And I think people should go back and watch Trump's interview with Bernie Sanders, who is
Rogan's interview with Bernie Sanders.
Sorry, Rogan's interview with Bernie Sanders, who I don't think that Bernie Sanders could be any more opposite than Trump on a policy level. Bernie Sanders is basically a socialist, and I mean, he is a socialist, and it's just welfare state. It's a really different direction. But I think Bernie Sanders is a great example of like an actual populist from the left who's a real person who can do interviews and stuff. He's kind of a boring guy who's obsessed with policy, but he's a real person and people know that. Like he'll sit down and have a hamburger with you or whatever. And the problem
to
with Bernie,
some extent, but he also has never had a real job, So I don't think that he's relatable in that sense.
Arguably, Donald Trump hasn't either. He came out the womb a multimillionaire. I mean, you know
But
what I'm saying?
yeah, there's a difference between running for a position as a politician and even being handed an empire and being able to keep it rolling for your whole life.
The argument
you have to
like
get out of bed and work for
the
that,
argument of how somebody makes their money, weighing how somebody might vote is a whole different argument that I don't know. I don't think that had a huge bearing on it, but I mean, maybe. I mean, it definitely helps his like, I'm not a politician, like that whole message of being like authentic. He's like, I don't even know how to do any of this political stuff. I think it strengthens that whole concept. But I think it just adds to this him being authentic. Like, look, I'm not a career politician. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not doing canned scripts. I'm just doing my own thing. And I'm just saying what should be probably learned from the future from both parties is they need to figure out how to put more of those candidates forward. Candidates who are very down to earth and down to earth. Donald Trump isn't really down to earth, but transparent and authentic and like comfortable and bold in who they are and don't care. Because I think that
how much
we're getting into an age where you have to do 4-hour interviews so that the public can see you, because that's what the public wants to consume, because they want to see what kind of a person you are. And because if they can see that you're a real person, they'll trust you. I mean, that's period.
I completely disagree for the sake of the argument, based on the fact that I think that Trump's personality is more of a turn off than a turn on.
Why did 100 million people watch Joe Rogan talk to him about almost nothing for 3 hours?
Very interested in his policies.
Okay. So I want to prove my point. My final piece of evidence is this. It's this example that we can imagine, and I can't prove to you that this would happen. It's completely hypothetical. But in an alternate universe, imagine that Hillary Clinton is running for the Republican candidate for president, because she's almost a Republican anyway. a neocon war hawk Republican. Hillary Clinton honestly almost is. Her vice president is Kamala Harris, who is Republican in this alternate universe. Okay, they're running. They're going to be the first female president, vice president. It's a power team, and um, who they're running against for the Democratic Party is Donald J. Trump. So in this alternate universe, Donald Trump never left the Democratic Party, and here's his policy: semi-open borders. We need to go to war in Ukraine. We need to help Israel defend herself and push harder into that war. We need to kind of police the world, kind of war hawkish, right? Because that is unfortunately where the seat of power in the DNC is right now. That's what they're united around. And that was where the Republican Party was centered around until Trump won the primary sort of by accident. So in this world, he is like a war hawk Democrat who is pushing towards more open borders, wants to increase welfare, equality, the common man. Those are his policies. And he's still just as brash, still just as braggadocious, still doing his dance, all of the things against a warhawk neocon Hillary Clinton, okay, in this alternate realm. My theory is that because of the nature, this new world we're in with social media, and just where our culture is, and the younger generation coming into voting age, I think that even liberal Trump in this alternate world would still get elected because he's being transparent and he's wearing his personality and his on his sleeve, and he's being brash and doing unscripted things all the time, creating viral moments all the time, and is just hard to stand up next to. I think he would win, even with the opposite set of policies out there. And I think that's the lesson. The lesson is that populism, the new populism, needs to like be embraced by the parties, and they need to quit throwing political actors up on the stage to be elected.
I've got one linchpin for you. You
Okay.
put him in against a conservative Obama, who's much more of a better speaker, and he can get down to the grassroots.
Obama
Who
is probably
wins then?
he's got to be the greatest political speaker in 100 years. Like, honestly, he's a statesman. He's like the most presidential president I've ever heard of.
I think based on that personality, then Obama wins. And is that a point for you or me? No one will know. This
That
episode's
might, oh, that just might be a point
over.
for Obama. Obama is such a good actor, you don't even care that he's doing it. That's the best politician in recent years in the old guard. You know what I mean? It's like they're so good at it, you know it's happening, and you don't care.
Yeah, his policies were not good, but he was so likable and so well spoken that I think a lot of people did lean towards him. And because
Well, you know what the complaints were against him on the left. I'll tell you. I'm not on the left, but I consider myself firmly in the middle. But I have a lot of friends and family on the left, and I have a lot of friends and family on the right. The complaint that came from inside the left, the right says, "Oh, he just did all this crazy stuff." The left says the same thing. Their frustration is he didn't say what he was going to do, and then he changed his mind on a bunch of things, and he, not everything, but man, we ended up going into tons of war, and he was like the peace candidate. But he was running against John McCain, who came out in a military garb to speeches and stuff. So of course Obama ran on that. But again, we're talking about politicians again. And it's like, as much as you might like Obama, love Obama, like some people really are just like, man, I miss Obama. And yet after his presidency, those same people were like, yeah, Obama deceived me. So there's this understanding, like in the American mind, that politicians lie, like period. And Trump,
man, I don't
and
I
he's
just
like, I'm
can't
not
I
a
can't
politician.
buy on to your side of the argument only because he's so unlikable. Because if you put somebody else that's likable, like if Dwayne Johnson ran for president with no experience, he's so likable, so many people would be proud to vote for him. He could run on the right or he could run on the left, and people would be like, yeah, I voted for The Rock, and the other countries are going to smell what The Rock is cooking. Like, this is going to be awesome. And he looks great in a suit, regardless of what his policies are. So I
Well,
don't think that Trump's personality
I
helped
mean,
him at
I do
all.
think, I
It
think,
may help that he wasn't tried and true politician. That may have helped him pick up some votes. But I really think that the majority of his personality was a detriment to him, not a favor to him. And
I
I
mean,
think
I do
Americans
think you
voted
have
for
to
him
care
for his
about policy.
policies.
Policy matters, but it only, I think, matters in the context of whether people believe you're actually going to be able to, you actually believe that policy or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, listen, man, I like Dwayne, you brought up Dwayne Johnson. It's the perfect example because people love him, but he has talked about seeking political office, and go read the comment section. It's not good. And the reason why is because it's really clear when he's talked about politics that like his reputation now online is just like he doesn't know what he's like. He's an amateur in the realm of politics. Like he just doesn't understand. Stick to making movies, Dwayne. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't understand policy. And when somebody doesn't understand policy, even if when they're authentic, they reveal that they don't understand policy. And it shows that to everybody. You go, okay, that's why being authentic and transparent creates trust, regardless of how likable or unlikable they are, because it reveals to people like when Trump sits with Joe Rogan for 3 hours, it just reasserts to people watching that he really believes and knows about what he has conviction. He really thinks he has a plan, like off script, authentically sitting and having a beer with him, kind of a thing, the same plan, right? Like one of the things that got said about Kamala Harris and many other politicians that have run is that they're a flip flopper. They said this yesterday and this today. Now, that's okay to change your mind. We're all human. Why don't they just say, I thought about it, I looked at this other evidence, and I changed my mind? That's how we all talk to each other as human beings. We change our minds on things. But when you ask a politician how they change their mind, and Donald Trump will talk that way too. He'll just be like, "Yeah, I changed my mind," and like everybody like shrugs because that's how we all talk. But when Kamala Harris got pressed about flip flopping on this issue or that issue, she would just this big long political canned spiel with misdirects and then a subject change at the end, and everybody at this point kind of like rolls their eyes and goes, yeah, she's just not willing to talk about that because she's not prepared to, or there's an embarrassing answer there, or something like that, or she doesn't know, I guess. I don't know. And
But
no,
I
like,
don't know that Trump's answers to things are any more satisfying because he also can riff and roll and change the subject and not answer questions directly. And I think we saw that a lot in questions that he was asked during this campaign run. And then to go really quickly back to actors then getting into political office, you've got Reagan, and then who was governor, so he had experience before running for president. But you also had Schwarzenegger, who was governor of California, and I think that that was a complete popularity contest, and people voted for him because they had seen him as the Terminator, not because he had any sort of political insight or knowledge. And I don't know how we've now switched sides on this, but I'm saying that yes, people will vote for someone who's popular, but I don't think that Trump's personality helps him pick up any votes. I think it's more of a detriment. I think that people, as they were exiting the polls, were saying that they don't like how the economy is. And I think that the fact that Harris couldn't say that she was going to do anything different than what Joe Biden was already doing was a huge detriment to her. And so I think that knowing that we were going to get something completely opposite with taxes affecting the economy, with immigration, and with foreign policy, knowing that if we had Trump in office, we were looking at those big 3 to 4 things. And I think abortion was probably a big one for a lot of people as well. It always is. And potentially also even gun rights, knowing where that the two different candidates fall on completely different sides of the aisle about that. Even though Kamala, while she was running, was trying to kind of say like, "Oh, I own a Glock,"
right.
um,
Well,
and
that's bro, that's the thing though. Like, the president doesn't make every decision. And when it comes down to it, people are voting on these people. You're voting on a president not really knowing what they're going to do exactly, right? Like we, you know, people voted for Trump in 2016. One of the big reasons policy wise was he was going to build the wall, which definitely didn't happen. Like otherwise it wouldn't still be a topic, right? Like he built a very small amount of wall and there were reasons why, right? But the promise and the statement and the goal, which changed fairly quickly when he was in office, was he was going to build a wall. He didn't build a wall. And nobody really got all that mad at him for it. And I think that's because I think everybody knows that promises going in to office and policy statements give a rough idea at best of what people are actually going to do. And we don't socially or emotionally hold candidates accountable at all for that. We tend to just hold to party lines. People who are blue complain about what the reds didn't do, and people who are red complain about what the blue candidates didn't do. You know what I mean? Like that, but that's not accountability because they're never going to change their vote. I think that people who are in the middle are kind of more looking at it kind of in confusion, going like, who do I trust? Who do I vote for? And I think that's why there was a landslide. Is because I think that I'm sure that Kamala Harris is a much nicer person than Donald Trump, maybe, like on a relational level. But you know what? Like, because that's how she comes across. But I don't even know. I don't even know because she's an actress, right? Like, I don't know what she's really like. There's just teeny little glimpses. I know exactly what Donald Trump is like. Like, I think people feel like they can trust on the statements of Donald Trump more, even if sometimes they're crazy or out of touch because he's a real person. I think that's the idea because Kamala Harris is still bound by the old rules of the game where she might be saying this, that, or the other thing, but the truth be told, like a couple of years from now, it's possible that literally none of that sticks, and that those are all just empty things that a politician said to win demographics over.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say too that I think defends my opinion of that it's policy over populist popularity is that Kamala definitely, as she was being interviewed and as she was at rallies, more so as she was being interviewed, walked back and shifted things that statements that she had made in the past. And so she softened up on a lot of the things on the touchy issues where she had more hardline positions previously. Like specifically, if you compare things that she was saying when she was running for the presidency before she was picked as vice president running mate, she was in this running for presidency started to say different things about policies or even opposing things to what she had said before, but definitely was trying to bring herself more, and I'm sure was being coached to bring herself more towards the middle in an effort to pick up votes. Um, Whereas Trump is definitely has had basically the same talking points since his first run in office, other than he's kind of solidified more his opinion on abortion. I think specifically with that little clip that was played about him voting or not voting in Florida for the measure that they had there. That
Yeah,
was a 16-week, maybe abortion, and before I think that people would have said that he was completely against any abortion at all. Was I think the understanding of his policy. But with that said, I think that his policies haven't changed, and so seeing Trump originally with how he enacted his policies back in 2016, and then seeing what Biden did in office from 2020, and now going back to Trump, I think it's the shift in an America that's realizing that their values are more aligned with Trump's policies. And to heck with his personality, in my opinion.
yeah, and I think that's possible. I know it's true in part, but and I respect your opinion. I think and I hope that this is in the midst of culture changing and technologies, adapting. My hope is that um, all of the future candidates are going to be more populist. And again, the definition of populist being not more likable, but being for the people and anti-establishment. That's populism. And I think that America on both sides of the political spectrum needs more of that because corporate lobbyist like industrial war machine stuff is so drenched. Like Washington is so drenched with that stuff on both sides. Like it's just so weird. But when you go and you look at the types of decisions that got made, most of them by presidents and the power of the president, because the president is not the Federal Reserve. The president is not this other nation. The president is not your state legislature. Like this president has specific tasks. They can affect a lot of things, but they end up promising a lot of things that they can't do, like Congress has to do that. You know what I mean? The number one thing a president can control, the primary things a president controls don't really change from party to party. Like the way our military budget was under George W. Bush was about what it was under Barack Obama. You know, like there's like some of these
Yeah,
things.
it's I'm
So
so
policy
divided on
support,
this
but it's
topic because yeah, abortion is something that the president d doesn't have the ability to change. The only reason they're blaming Trump or crediting Trump with the way that abortion is being handled now is by he had the opportunity and seized on the opportunity to get the judges in the Supreme Court that he has. But what the president can do is he can push for things like, yes, he needs the support of Congress, but he can push for a lot of things in environmental um, tax, which goes both ways, good or bad. So with Biden in office, we've seen that things like oil pipelines are shut down, more heavily regulated, which we all know that Trump has talked about and will ultimately loosen up the regulations on drilling and fracking. You also see that definitely with the support of Congress, obviously, gun control mandates can be put in and locked down or lifted. We saw that both with Obama and with Bush. And you can see also that um, taxes with what federal spending they want to cut or what they want to tax. Trump was able to implement tax cuts. And on the tax side or associated with taxes, Biden was able to implement the debt forgiveness for student loans, which is tax adjacent because he's using taxpayer money to pay for
right.
that.
No,
So
so
yes, there's a ton of
makes
power, and
sense.
then there's also to
When
some
you
extent
when
without
you
Congress,
look in
no
the
power.
when you look in the realm of conservative policies, right? There are it's not one group of policies. There is some diversity, but the seat of power in the GOP tends to be a set of policies. Um, I was reading today how Mitch McConnell hates Donald Trump, and he's the Speaker of the House. So he's like one of the most powerful Republicans in the country. Like he leads the House of Representatives in leadership and discussions, how they vote. He's a super primary factor in how bills get passed, particularly when there's a Republican majority. So like he strongly disagrees with a number of specific nuances and policies that Donald Trump has. For example, Mitch McConnell is extraordinarily pro war in Ukraine. I mean, he passed a is it $7 or $70 billion package that got sent to Ukraine, which Ukraine immediately turned around and spent on American missiles, arms, and weapons and jackets and all that stuff. Like
Yeah,
they
70.
Yeah, 70 billion. Thank you. So yeah, it's like money laundering effectively into these like army, private army specific, American corporations. Donald Trump has verbalized really clearly he doesn't want that. So there's conflict. Like there's not one clear set of Republican policies, just like there's not a clear set of Democratic policies. Like the policies of Bernie Sanders are wildly different than the policies of Joe Biden. Wildly different. They shouldn't even be in the same party, right? Like similarly, like the policies of Donald Trump are wildly different than the policies of Jeb Bush. Now, why? Jeb Bush is his policies are just what it looks to be a corporate lobbyist owned Republican, which is why I don't like Ron DeSantis either. There's a part of me that likes Ron DeSantis because Ron DeSantis is aimed at me, but I'm like, he's a politician. So why? So I guess to answer the policy thing in regards to Trump and why would people vote? Well, they voted. So the argument of like, well, Trump is getting voted in on the merit of conservative policy, I don't think makes a lot of sense. And here's why. Why did his own party attack him and his policy stances in 2016? He barely made it through the Republican primary alive. And then even after that, Fox News was demonizing him for a bit until it finally jumped on board because all of its donors told him to. And then they fired Megyn Kelly, if you recall, for her negative interview towards Trump while they were still pointing guns at him. Right. So why was there this policy war over that? Why is there interfaction war? Why didn't the GOP like Trump? If conservative policy is what unites the country, why are there different kinds of conservative policy? Why isn't it united amongst the party? Does that make sense?
I think that what you're saying right now is the exact same thing that the Democrats are saying right now about all of their woes with Trump being elected, is that ultimately the Republicans didn't necessarily like Trump either. And Fox News originally saw him as, to some extent, a hazard as well. But that's not the voters. That's not the American people. And I think what caused the American people to vote the way they did in this election is seeing 4 years of bad policy being enacted and now coming into knowing that Trump is going to do the exact opposite of so many of the policies that Biden enacted and acted out, that's why they voted for him. Policy over
If
personality.
that's true, then JD Vance will get reelected in 4 years, you know what I mean? Or whoever the GOP puts up. If
Depending on
Trump,
how he does, yeah, I could see that as being completely viable. I would almost like to see
ratings, if his approval ratings above 45%, they'll run JD Vance, who will continue the main line. And I mean, hypothetically, though, if your argument is right and the country is turning red towards Republican policy, then they could put anybody up who's going to clearly dictate Republican policy. I guess what I'm saying is, I think it was similar 40 or 48 years since there's been a Republican win the popular vote by a margin of greater than 1%. The last popular vote that got won was George W. Bush, but he won by like 0.05, or it was like very, very tight. And again, all kind of seedy getting into Florida and stuff. But yeah, he won the popular vote, but it was by such a slim margin. Everybody just kind of looked at it and went, man, it was pretty much 50-50, you know? That was George W. Now, before that, it was almost a half a century ago, man. Like this was either an astoundingly different thing, or this is a dramatically new shift. And a lot of people have changed their mind about policy. And the thing is, but one thing that has happened a lot in history is that whenever there's a low approval rating, statistically, there's just like an incredibly low chance that same political party, even with a totally different candidate, like if your approval rating is low after your second term and you can't run, but if your approval rating is low, a much better candidate to kind of take over for you won't get elected because they're in the same party. Because there's just this huge mass of people who vote dynamically and who are independent, who really just kind of go like, it's a little bit of overcorrection from one side of the road. The Republicans have been running the country for a while, and now we're like up to our neck in war. And like everybody wants to veer to the other side of the road and vote for Barack Obama. You know what I mean? And then you get into Barack Obama, it's like, whoa, now we're still kind of, yeah, geez, we are still in war. And, he just like, the bailouts and the housing crisis and everything else, you know what I mean? And we're just,
Yeah, going between driving in opposing traffic in the other lane towards veering towards
yeah. And,
the gutter on the
and
side of
you
the road with the
hear,
cliff.
one thing you hear from both sides is this hope that the country is going to turn more blue or turn more red. And I don't, maybe, but I don't think so. I mean, I think that there are some reasons why he won by a massive landslide, pretty historical numbers, really. And there's probably lots of little reasons. You know, the fact there was no Democratic primary didn't look good on her. Even if she would have won it, it just didn't look good. It just lowered everybody's confidence. But I think more than that, she didn't know. She's a politician, and she didn't know how to do well in the social media climate that we have. And Trump thrived in it. And the
But
Democratic
do you
Party,
think that Biden was more relatable than um, Harris or
the
um,
whole country spent 4 years making fun of how he stumbled over himself.
no, no, I mean why he got elected. So that, I think he was in relative
It was
perceived as relatively good health when he was elected. Running it
COVID.
now, Trump versus Harris or um, Trump in 2016.
It was COVID. I think it was pure COVID. I mean, I think they would have. I think the country would have voted, was in a panic and would have voted for pretty much anybody. That was just really weird timing because Trump didn't have time to get through it to show that he got us through it. So you're right in the middle of it. It really goes one way or another. People say, I've heard it said that, like, statistically, if there's wars going on in the middle of elections, it like heavily sways the side towards the incumbent. So whoever's currently president, because everybody just kind of, society just sort of feels like, let's just not mess up anything here. Like there's an active conflict. Let's keep the current general like in place. You know what I mean? But I think that when there's financial or health disasters that are really, really bad, there's only been a handful of them over the course of like American history we can look at. People flip. And even if it's unfair because the conflict just or the disaster just started happening, people are just kind of like, well, this they just there's a negative connotation. I think that Trump really caught the negative side of all of that. And then I think the way that Biden's administration came in and built itself very, very deep statey and very corporate lobbyist interest and you know and then immediately jumping into like federal mandates and stuff. I mean, the whole country immediately had buyer's remorse, real quick about how all that happened. And COVID was, it was miserable for the country. Probably good for everyone.
Yeah, there was definitely no um throughout Biden's presidency, there was no real rah 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 Biden's the best going on for sure.
No,
But as soon as Kamala was announced, there was a huge support for her, and I think it was not necessarily based on personality, but more so race and gender. They go and age even too. Honestly, they go she's younger, she's female, and she's Indian African American. So that's great. That checks all of our boxes. If we're going just for, and that's not personality. That's also hitting some sort of demographic thing that they can check off. But I would say that personality for the right and all of those boxes for the left are kind of equal value almost. I would say the right wants to see someone that they can have a beer with, and the left wants to see progress. They want to see progressive. They want to see a female. They want to see minority. And they want, in this case, age became a huge factor where they wanted to see somebody who wasn't an octogenarian. My final point, real quick, was that if I think to argue against it being a populist vote based on Trump's personality and his transparency, the last factor that I have is based on that age breakdown. So 49% to 49% with a missing factor of 2% there. 65 and over voted 49% Democrat and 49% Republican. When you drop down to the next age bracket, 50 to 64 age bracket, which is kissing between, that's pretty much all Gen X technically. So all of Gen X voted 43% Democrat, 56% Republican. And then it drops from there to 40 to 49 is 50 for Trump and 48. And then that's it. Then we start to see the reverse. So from 30 to 39, we see 50% for Kamala, 46% with a 4% unknown. And then we see a 53 for Kamala with a 45 between the age bracket of 25 to 29. And then 18 to 24-year-olds is 54% Kamala and 42% for Trump. I think that if it was based off of truly transparency and seeing his personality, which is the people who are listening to podcasts, the people who are on social media, the people who are on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, if that generation who says, oh, this is just a politician, I'm not going to vote for a politician, I want to vote for somebody that I feel like I could have a beer with, or I feel like I kind of know this person based on what I'm seeing in front of me, then I feel like that he would have picked up more of that younger vote and not had the old guard, the Gen X and boomers who are going, we don't care about his lawsuits, we don't care about sexual things going on, we've seen that before, everybody lives a life and makes mistakes. We're voting for his policies, not based on his personality.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Well, and I just want to assert as my final point, this isn't about personality. It's about being anti-establishment, and it's about being sort of proudly an outsider, non-political. And it's a trick because a party would have to, say, hey, here's a candidate that is non-political. Like, that's a really unique challenge to have, because you have to have somebody that disagrees. It's just hard for that person to get through a primary, because the way that our party system is set up is so naturally bent towards having the biggest tool bag ever make it through the primaries, because there's so much lobbyist interest in each respective party. So to have a real outsider who's an actual free thinker and an actual independent human being make their way into that political arena and come through the other side is extraordinarily hard. But I think my final point is, I think that the Donald Trump figured out how to do it, and he has a bunch of kids, and he's building a bunch of allies in party, even from the Democratic Party. And if the Democratic Party doesn't figure out how to win the American people over like Donald Trump has, they're screwed, because then there'll be a Donald Trump Jr. president and a J.D. Vance president, or a Tulsi Gabbard president, hopefully, and and someday a Barron Trump president. And
I think you missed, I hate to interrupt your
counter.
final swing. You missed a huge bullet point by bringing in Tulsi Gabbard. She, I think, could win it based on personality. I think she has fine policies, but she is so much more relatable as a real human being, more than any other person that's on the ticket. And so I think
I think she, and that's what my argument is really, just that I think there needs to be kind of a new breed of politician that can have a human conversation for hours long. That can be.
And Tulsi Gabbard does. She's been on like Jocko Willink. I don't know if she's ever been on Joe Rogan, but yeah,
she has. She's been on Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink, and she's been on Fox News. She's been on CNN and MSNBC. She's been on The View. She's been, and she does well in the debates. There's lots of like viral highlights of her ripping Kamala Harris apart in the Democratic primary in 2015-16, and Tulsi Gabbard's great. I think that she's another example of somebody who actually could pull a lot of votes in from independent people, because she is perceived as a human. I think what she has that Trump doesn't have is she has a level of feminine, but still very like statesmanship that reminds me of um, Obama or something like that. Well,
She has
there's
a
a
lot that Trump doesn't have too, because she doesn't have a muddled past. She's not
yeah,
considered a billionaire oligarch, and she's still serving right now, as far as I know, in the armed
yeah.
forces. So she's got a lot going for her in the relatability category,
She
more than
does, but
anybody I've ever seen.
she has something that's a massive setback. She doesn't like lobbyists and corporate interests. And that keeps you out of the public eye because it just turns out that that's what puts you, that agreeing with them is what puts you into the public eye. For example, Kamala Harris, like, and Joe Biden and George W. Bush, like, where do these people come from? They come from corporate lobbyists and these, like, what are these corporations? And I mean, look it up. Just look it up. It's it's a lot of missiles and bullets and and pharma, and it's money. It's just where the money comes from. You know what I mean? And the candidates who, I think that Donald Trump has been kind of a breaker because he has his own wealth and came in not really needing much lobbyists. He hasn't stayed totally free and clear from it, but by and large, he is, I think, the most populist candidate that has been in office for a while. Um, and love him or hate him, you have to be able to see that. Even if you think he's insane and crazy and made bad decisions, you have to be able to kind of recognize the fact that he's not playing by any political party's rules, and that I think that's a huge component of why people trust him. And I think there could be far better candidates even in the future if whichever party can, and right now it's the Republican Party, can figure out that magic sauce, because Donald Trump has one more term. Who's going to run next? And are they going to be able to do the landslide victory again? Well, I think that only if they can figure out why people voted for Trump. If it's just a matter of policy, it's possible. And that just means that if the next Republican candidate has the same policy and people liked it, they'll get in. That would be very simple. But it's possible. if if it's more uniquely complex to like Trump himself, I would say it has to do with him being the first populist that has made it through the lobbyists. And that means that he kind of solved that problem for the GOP because he turned the party from being war hawkish to now the public persona of what the Republican Party is now is really different from 10 years ago. You know what I mean? It was still the George W. Bush party 10 years ago. Now it's kind of the libertarian anti-war party, kind of. That's all about like America first and making home strong. And
Yeah,
that
I
is
agree with that.
not what
Or
it
your
was. It
take
was
on that.
police
Yeah.
the world 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was only because he survived the very savage. Just go watch highlights from Fox News in 2015. It's absolutely insane. Like they were trying to they were just doing smear campaign after smear campaign. Fox News was for a very long time. Like they didn't want him to come through because their super PACs didn't want him to come through because he didn't have those interests in mind. Because he was just like, look, I have my own money. This is what I think needs to happen. You know what I mean? The DNC has had nobody make it through that. When Bernie Sanders ran, that he's the closest example of like a populist candidate that doesn't just want what the corporate interests want within the party. They crucified him practically. Like they just started ripping up his whole career and everything, and they called him like a rich liar and all these things. And he couldn't make it through a Democratic primary. And so then they put the politicians up instead, who would toe the line. That's really my perspective. And if until they figure out how to do that better, I don't think they're going to get anybody in. If it takes them 20 years to figure it out, that's going to be how long it is before there's a Democratic president again.
So follow-up question on that then. Democrats in 4 years, they put up somebody who's not a part of the old guard. Do they win?
I think that depends on who the Republican candidate is. And then I think that if both are authentic in that way and they're both populists, like true populists who are kind of anti-establishment, um, uh, then I think what it comes down to is the approval rating of the incumbent. It's how what is the approval rating of what Trump did, because that becomes the nudge on the tug of war. Really, is the approval rating above 50% or below 40%?
Yeah, that's tough because I think the best person that the Democrats have that is more understood by the seem to be accepted by the common man would definitely be Bernie Sanders for sure, like you brought up earlier. But everyone
He's had his time,
in the Democratic Party does not like him.
which is
Nobody
which
likes
is
him, you know.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If the Democratic Party really kind of has become, it's I don't want to speak this over every Democrat, but like the candidates of the Democrat, the powerful figures in the Democratic Party that could conceivably be candidates are not great. Like I read a poll today about like who are the potential candidates, and it was by voting, like who people thought would be good ideas, right? It was on Reddit. And you know who rose to the top of the list of like the best Democratic candidate for president in 2028?
Newsom.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes, you are Gavin
Yeah.
Newsom,
Yep.
and it's
I
just
figured so.
he's just one of the well-known, powerful figures, and he the governor of California. And I'm just telling you, if like he'll lose, I don't even care who he runs against. In the wake of Trump, even somebody like just somebody running from Trump's camp is going to carry more weight than Gavin Newsom. And again, I think it's from this perspective of people want a real person. So Gavin Newsom is like a politician's politician with fake teeth and a giant smile and oiled hair. And he's running California. There's a million ways you can poke holes in him, and you can point towards giant disasters he's created. On an internal level, he does what donors tell him to do, and he therefore then flip flops on things, because that's why most politicians flip flop on things. Is they get a new donor, the donor's interests change, and so his donors' interests wanted homelessness to increase, literally, and that's what happened. And then they wanted it to go away, literally, because the super PACs wanted the Democratic Party to look better for the election and all that stuff. So now that damaging to all the homeless people who are being jerked around by this whiplash, kind of stuff. That's Gavin Newsom, man. Like, and more than that, if he were to go on Joe Rogan for 3 hours, it wouldn't be good. He's a flashier, bigger smile, and he could do that conversation a lot better than Kamala Harris could, I think. But I think he's going to come across like a snake, because I think he is. Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of Republican politicians that are a snake. They're just snaky, oily politicians. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he might. It's tough too because I think Joe Rogan is so good at just pulling out people's natural ability to have a conversation. I think that my
Yeah.
fear with him being on Joe Rogan is he's so used to kissing babies and shaking hands that Newsom would do just fine in an interview like that. Like it would be totally superficial. Joe Rogan probably wouldn't push him on anything. He might, the worst thing he would say is, "Hey, I left California because taxes are crazy. Why are they crazy?" And Newsom would say, "Well, California is super nice, and so we got to pay for everything. So taxes were wild, and COVID probably had a huge effect on you leaving, Joe. And we have more
No,
people
no, man, it
here."
wouldn't look good because Joe would start talking about the homeless people. And you can go listen to Gavin Newsom's being pressed on that right now. And it's so dodgy and weird because it's like all these homeless people are here because of policy you put in place. Like you, you made it so human beings could live in this way and set up camp and home and build things on the streets. And now you're saying they have 48 hours to leave or they're getting put in jail and their stuff's being burned. Like that's what you're doing. You're scraping them off the street. And yeah, they shouldn't be there, but you put them there. Like you told them to be there. So this is a really weird position to take. I go read the interviews because they just passed this massive law. Now they can give like a 48-hour camping notice in California and they can just remove people. People who have built like stick frame tarp structures like on the sidewalk and stuff and in fields, and it's now just immediately like illegal with, and it's just crazy. So when he gets pressed on that, he starts to do the dance, the political smoke and mirrors dance of, you know, um, just all the coaching they go through and the canned statements and all that crap. And people just kind of roll their eyes and go, yeah, this is what you get for voting in a politician. Even though you like his smile and he's personable and all this stuff, that's his job. He's an actor.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, if the DNC can't get a better guy than that, they're going to lose. And they're going to keep losing. Because I think that because of Trump's victory in the Republican primary in 2016, and with this victory, I think I mean, and look at the administration he's pulling in. And the allies he's creating, Tucker Carlson, who's, basically lost his job at Fox because of how anti-war he was. Like, I don't agree with everything Tucker Carlson says, but I love him. I think he's authentic. I think he lost his job because the lobbyists didn't like what he was saying that owned Fox News, right? Like, he's an honest dude. Like, Trump has pulled Tucker Carlson in as an ally, right? So he's assembling these allies, these teams. So the power figures in the Republican Party are changing pretty rapidly. And that is going to, all of the people, when I talked about that political spectrum, all the people who are like red forever, their ideas about what should happen, because they're very loyal, because they're red, just like the very blue people are. The very red people and the very blue people just kind of, they will shift and pivot with the party. Do you know what I mean? So in the George W. Bush Republican years, the very red Republicans were just like, yep, weapons of mass destruction. Yep. There's people suffering over there and we got to do something about it or whatever. And now I'm still friends with all those very red Republicans. They aren't saying that anymore. They're saying something totally different, which is leaning way more anti-war. I just think these stupid wars should just end. We don't need to be there. We need to focus at home and get inflation down and get the market better. That's the message of Trump, right? So the identity of the policies of the Republican Party are like going through puberty right now. They're going through this massive like shift and evolution because the power figures are changing. And so who everybody's listening to is changing. And then the media and podcasts and everything follow suit. The Democratic Party is going to fall way behind if they don't go through some kind of a shift and a change. And I guess what I'm saying is I think the country now wants a populist message. The DNC, as soon as they have somebody that's like, look, I might be a Democrat, but I just am sick of all the money interests and the war and everything else and and all that, but to still carry the like values of like human values and equality and all those values that people are Democrats for, but they need somebody who's going to stand up there and not be an actor, not Gavin Newsom, you know what I mean, not Joe Biden, maybe not even Barack Obama, man, because now Trump has occurred. You know what I mean? And COVID happened. And then the classic politician created massive regulatory mandates on the whole world that even people who agreed with it at the time didn't like. Now, looking back. So it's like,
Yeah.
in times of disaster, the real hardcore politician wasn't a great choice. That's what the whole nation pulled from that, I think. So that's why his approval rating was so low. His approval rating is like freaking 28% or something. It was awful, right? I think that's why it was so low.
If I will say this in an attempt to hop on your side of the debate here, if Tulsi Gabbard had stayed in the Democratic Party and you put up Newsom versus Tulsi Gabbard, I feel like the people would have voted for Tulsi.
I think that RFK Jr. would have had a shot at Trump as the Democratic candidate, and I think Tulsi Gabbard could have had a shot at Trump. As was crazy. If I say that, anybody right now who's a Democrat listening is going to say, "Oh, he's just listening to the psyops, like Republican spies." Like, they're not. I think that that's how brainwashed the Democratic Party is right now, because they're party evolution, because like the ideals of the party are so rigorous, right? Because once again, Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump, two totally different creatures in the world of policy. They couldn't disagree more about how to handle international affairs or internal affairs. But they're in the same party and they have to coexist. The Democratic Party is not like that. There are not vastly different figures that are coexisting. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat anymore. He changed to independent.
Yeah, I saw
Right?
that.
Like he can't. He was like, I've had enough of this, and he hates the Democratic Party now. So that's like a thing of the past. Tulsi Gabbard left the Republican Party a week ago, and RFK. I don't know if he's. I think he's an independent now. And so I guess what I'm saying is like the only populist thinkers that are in the Democratic Party are getting chased out. And so now the best thing that Reddit can even imagine being the next candidate is Gavin Newsom. That is not a good sign for the Democratic Party. That's great news if you're a conservative Republican and you want to see red presidents as far as the eye can see. It's looking that way based on, what I think. The only thing that would change that is if the Democratic Party really stopped making excuses and evaluated itself and was just like, maybe we should stop putting stooges on the stage, and the GOP didn't figure this out for themselves either. Trump just won. It was like completely by accident. Megyn Kelly lost her job over it. You know what I mean? She had him on prior to him winning the Republican primary in 2015-16. And she was like pushing and making him out to be an a-hole and like just trying to be really mean to him. And he like really got mad at her about it. And she did an interview with him again after he won the primary, and she was trying to be all nice, and he was being really mean to her. And basically the concept was just Trump hated her at that point, and Fox fired her, just like bye, And now Megyn Kelly's her own thing with her own show, but like she lost her big job. She was like the head reporter there. So like, what exactly happened? What happened was that the GOP, and therefore then Fox News, was forced to accept a candidate they didn't really want because he wasn't representing their interests. That created a little revolution in the party. And the ideas changed based on what Trump's ideas and policies were. Everybody kind of had to follow suit. So there was sort of a new head lion that kind of came into place that didn't meet the standards of the old guard, right? So the party is now going through this massive change. And now there's been this massive win. And the DNC has gotten really rooted in a bunch of ideas to the point of even kicking people out who aren't like extreme enough to fit those ideas. And they just
I think that if they can find somebody though that checks off enough of those minority boxes for them, if they could find another Obama, like if they could find a male that's black or a female that's white, they would push. And I think they're so angry right now that Trump got elected that I think that there's going to be more of an upswing and more people voting in the next election than we saw a turnout
I think that
this election.
That might be true, but I think that regardless of that, they need to find somebody who's an exceptional human being, but one that can be authentically not political, who at least has the ability to do that. You know what I mean? So, and I don't even know who to imagine right now because there's nobody in the party who really can do that I'm aware of.
No, and I do agree that I think with Mitt Romney, the reason that Obama won, besides being an incumbent, was that Obama was more likable at a glance on the stage than Mitt Romney. And when you look at, I think that that had a bigger voter turnout based on personality and um, being a part of something that people can relate to more than policy in that one.
Yeah.
Which is like the last pre-Trump election,
Yeah.
to go
Right.
off of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and the bridge I'll build with you, bro, is that policy is important and it does impact how people vote. So, I mean, I recognize that.
I
It's
think a
probably,
lot of people too voted begrudgingly for Trump because they find his personality annoying and they just checked a box because they go, he's got the right policies, but I wish he would close his mouth and not tweet on Truth Social.
well, Yeah, it was a good conversation, man. I appreciate your thoughts on it.
Yeah, this was good. So now, I think we should jump into our workout routines
Oh
that we're
yeah,
doing.
the workout routines real quick. How is it? How was arm day for you today?
Arm day is good. I, we may need to up it a little bit. How are you doing on soreness? Because when we were doing
I think
push-ups,
you saw my list. I did extra today because I'm
oh,
feeling
okay. And
push it
I didn't,
more.
but it was not out of soreness. It was out of just pushing them in at the last
I
minute
was
as
just
it's bedtime. Like brush your teeth, do a pull-up,
right,
you know?
right. I did more than my I had a couple different yes. So today the standard what we had to hit was 50 perfect push-ups, which is chest to ground. And I've been doing my chest hits the ground, but my nose has to almost touch the ground as well. So my whole body is coming like level to the ground perfectly. So right form, tucked butt, everything. Perfect push-up. Way harder to do than your average junior high push-up or high school push-up or whatever. So we have to do 50 of those a day, not necessarily in a row. And then pull-ups, we did 15 pull-ups today. I tried to pull it, mix in. There were all chin-ups, and then I did one pull-up and one lat pull-up. And dude, lat pull-ups are insane. Your arms are like way out, and then you're like having to kind of pull at this angle. It's
Yep.
rough. They are so
Yeah.
hard.
I like mixing it up a little bit, and once we got into the routine of the push-ups, I was just trying to get those done. But in the beginning, I was mixing in like diamonds and different things like that. With the pull-ups, I've been mixing it up every time we've done pull-ups. I haven't just done straight technical regular chin-ups. I've done kind of the Marine style where your legs are up, and then I've done wide and I've done narrow reverse grip, just because it feels like it's working different muscle groups
Yeah,
and the pull-ups already they're difficult no matter which way you do it, and so just doing them different ways is kind of fun because you do a set one way and then you do a set a different way, and you're tricking yourself into thinking you're getting a break. You're like, oh, now I'll do super wide, and then you're a few into the super wide, the lat pull-ups, and you're like, oh, this also is no fun, and then you go, well,
yeah,
maybe I'll do reverse grip with my legs up, that'll be easier. You
yeah.
do a couple of those and you're like, oh, this isn't any fun either,
No.
maybe I need
What's
to go
fun?
back to
What's fun
wides.
about it is that it's not fun. That's the strange mental
That
hurdle.
is the thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So no, it's
yeah
been
it's
super
good,
good.
it's
We're
good.
on a rotation of we do an arm day, an ab and core day, and then a leg day, and then we go through that cycle once more, and then we have a rest day on Sunday. So there's 6 days of three different focuses on the muscle groups. It's all body weight oriented, and we have like kind of a scale of going through it, and we've got a group chat where we talk and make sure that we're all hitting the requirements every day. To me, that's the biggest thing that's helping with consistency. It's more of a community feeling than like a workout plan. You know what I mean? Just like trying to make like there's accountability because I know if I don't, I'm worried. I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to like Nathaniel's gonna be bothering me at 9 p.m. if he doesn't hear from me. You know what I mean? Like, hey, did it this many of this many of that? Like, you know what I mean? On the day, and we're all doing those same amounts and same muscle groups together. So you know what I mean? There's good accountability in it. It's good,
And
healthy peer pressure.
yeah, and my son's old enough and he's read the Jocko books, and we one of his favorite pastime things, as being a 8-year-old boy, is obviously always playing military. And one of the things he likes to watch on YouTube videos is military fitness standards. And so we'll watch like a guy who's on YouTube doing, the Marine fitness standard or the Navy SEAL fitness standard, all these different standards and obstacle courses and things like that. And so I've got a guy who is expecting before we go to bed, we're either doing push-ups or sit-ups or we're doing squats, so I've got an in-house trainer,
Yeah.
8-year-old trainer expecting it. And he's into it, and he's doing good. And I haven't seen a lot of gains yet in the bulking department, but we'll get his protein up.
Nice.
And but it's good. So if you
Have
guys
you been,
have
have you been hitting the goals of your goal weight and protein?
No, but I have been taking the fish oil every day,
Nice.
because my knees were definitely bugging me. So I've been on the oil, taking like a vitamin D and a couple other small things. I'm not huge on supplements only because I feel like there was like a craze in the 80s, and the supplements, I think they've come a long ways, but I get nervous about supplements because I see a lot of people who were on a lot of supplements that
Yeah.
end up with a lot of organ issues because your body's
Yeah.
just filtering out a bunch of stuff that
Tons
it
of stuff.
doesn't
Yeah,
need.
exactly.
And so
No,
I
I
kind of
100%
stay away
think
from
that
that.
the natural supplements are awesome, like specifically derived from like not processed a lot. Like the fish oil's like oil from a fish, pretty straightforward, you know what I mean? I'm taking two different kinds of whey protein, and 5 grams of creatine, and I'm trying to hit 180 to 200 in grams of protein a day, which is really hard. I usually always can get to like 150, but it's just a lot of like calories to consume. It's
At
just
the end of the
actually,
night, you're just stealing food out of your dog's bowl, to hit those
yeah,
protein
100%.
numbers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I take beef, liver, beef joints, and collagen, and then beef scrotum. So yeah,
Are you taking a fish oil?
I have one that I take on occasion. Yeah, so yeah, not regularly every day.
Were your legs sore today from yesterday?
So sore, dude. Yeah, 100 body squats. It is. I really thought it wasn't going to be that bad. Oh, it was rough. So rough.
It's
And
similar
you know
to the
what Well said?
push-ups.
She said day two is worse. She said day two is worse with
That's
the
what I was kind of nervous about because I
yeah.
I feel like today was not too bad, but
Friday should
there's
always be leg day so we can have the weekend to like kind of like recover.
right. Yeah, that's a good point. The it gets rough because it's such an unnatural movement to repeat over and over, I think,
Yeah.
with the squats. Like to
Yeah.
do and the burpees were kind of that way too, where it becomes, which is great. I mean, I want to work on endurance type things. So if you go, can you do 100 squats with no weights, and someone would go, yeah, that's no problem.
Of
And then
course
it's
I
like, all right, we'll start counting them, and you
yeah.
go 35, not 65, 30. Dang,
Yeah.
they add up. Same with the push-ups. You kind of think in the back of your mind, like, I could probably easily bust out 45 perfect push-ups,
Right.
and you get down
Yeah,
there and you're like,
or
12.
as soon as you get past 20, your form starts to dramatically change.
Right,
You start to
right.
do like a really shallow push-up, you know what I mean? And it's like you just got to be honest with yourself, which is why we've got rules about like a body squat, butt's got to get below the knee line, or on perfect push-ups, chest getting to a certain point or whatever, or your elbow getting to a specific angle on different kinds of push-ups. But I mean, although, in the first month, we decided to throw form out a bit. It's just like, look, if you want to do shallow push-ups on push-up day, whatever, like just get your numbers in every day. And after like 10 days, form was starting to get better. After 20 days, it was like significantly better. Come, day 30, form was great. Do you know?
Yeah, and if you're cheating, you're cheating yourself.
Correct.
You're
Yeah.
that's
So
the
do
person
it.
that is going to
Do it.
lose out
Cheat.
is the person who doesn't do good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, go for it. If you want
Cheat.
to,
But like,
if you can
how
look
many days
yourself in the
can you cheat
mirror
in a row?
and look at your wife and she's going to look at you and you know that you didn't do 50 perfect push-ups, then
That's what
then
you
that's
thought. I looked at my wife and I was like, today I met my goals. I cheated, but I'll cheat less tomorrow. So,
Yeah, that's what wives want to hear. I can tell you what. So cool. Well, I think that wraps it up. Unless you have any closing thoughts, I think we beat this horse straight up to death, and I've
yeah,
got no more closing
it's
thoughts.
so dead. It's a skeletal horse. We're good. No,
Yeah.
no, I think we solved 42 is the answer to everything in the universe.
Yep. That's what it is. So can't wait till I hit the age 42.
Yeah, 100%. Joy day.
Alrighty, later.
We hit hard daily exercise sets together. Every day we're grinding it out. Join us, get ripped, get healthy, and most importantly, be consistent. The only way you can be without fail, which is having a team of people doing it with you. Contact us through the email on the screen to get started.